Could You podcast. I'm Lauren Tocci.
And I'm Ryan Tocci. It's all happening.
That's the thing from the start of our episode.
Yes, another one off the list. Now we got what?
Dark Knight and Lord of the Rings, Return of the King.
All right, maybe we'll do a Dark Knight episode. I don't think
we're doing Return of the King. You know why? Because the end of that movie is like a How Could You podcast episode. It should have ended an hour ago and it just keeps going.
It's so accurate.
Well, welcome to the episode.
Weirdly, hobbits jumping in our bed.
Welcome to the episode, everyone. So obviously, we are going to be talking about the film Almost Famous today. And
Are you sure it shouldn't be called Untitled?
Or The Journalist.
Or The Uncool.
Ooh. If you didn't know this movie had multiple titles. And this is not totally uncommon with a film to have like multiple draft titles. But Untitled gets used on the director's cut.
Bootleg edition, yeah.
Bootleg edition.
Yeah, that was really what the title was supposed to be.
Yeah.
I mean.
And the Uncool he wanted, but unfortunately the studio said it didn't make any sense. So it got called Almost Famous.
I liked his reason for Almost Famous.
Yes, do you want to explain to anyone who doesn't know?
That essentially it's talking about the people when you're at a concert and you're watching the band and you look to the side and you see these people on the side of the stage. The groupies, are they,
Band-Aids!
Are they friends of the band? Are they wives? Who are they? But they're jacked close to the stage. They're almost famous.
I just want to be almost famous. Being famous feels like a lot of pressure. Almost famous sounds like a lot of fun. Get to listen to free music.
We're more really far from famous.
We're more like, oh cool, there's seats available in the 200 level.
Right?
So with this, as we start every episode, we talk about some Tossi's takes, some things we liked in pop culture this week, some things we didn't. Ryan, do you have any Tossi's takes this week? Some things we liked, some things we maybe didn't like?
Leading me in there, huh? You know where I'm going with this.
Oh, I know where you're going.
Anyway, that's heard a couple episodes back, I think in season 2, maybe it was during the summer, but I had given a Tossi's take of the Dear Evan Hansen trailer. I was over the moon excited. I could not wait. I'm a huge Ben Platt fan, huge fan of the musical. Just could not wait for this. We went in, you were a little skeptical.
Yes.
I went in just excited, could not wait to hear the music in the theater. And I don't know the last time I was that disappointed leaving a movie. I mean, I wasn't mad. I was mad. I talked about this for days.
Yes, dude. I just kept getting these one-off emails from you where it was essentially like, and another thing!
This movie's a mess. I mean, here's my thing. If you've never seen the musical, and this is what I'm gathering from a lot of people, they come out kind of like, it was whatever. If you're a fan of the musical, I don't know how you like this movie. It's a mess of a movie. I think it's really poorly directed. Chbosky, who directed, who had done Perks of Being a Wallflower, and Wonder, both really nice, good movies. I'm gonna give them. They tried to rush Ben Platt being in this because it was obviously had aged out, and the fact you had the pandemic, which made things, and you feel it. The movie feels rushed. It's poorly shot. They made choices I don't understand that I think hurt the musical, the source material. It's just bad. I have no redeeming qualities of this movie, and I hate that because people that aren't going to have the chance to see Ben Platt on Broadway or see the musical ever, I think will now just have no desire to, that's my opinion. I'm hoping I'm wrong. I hope people go and see this and love it and they come out feeling differently than me, but I don't see it. It's just a bad movie. I
don't think people are going to come out loving it. I think they're going to be kind of that middle of the road feeling like it existed, it's there, whatever. And it's a shame because so the musical genius behind this, they're responsible for The Greatest Showman and La La Land. They write beautiful songs. And this is it's not exactly, the lightest of stories, but it's an important story. And I agree with you. It's honestly, it gave me very rare moments at the cinema that we don't normally experience. And that is, I really thought you were going to walk out of the movie.
I had thought about it.
And I've the only other times where you have said to me as we're walking out of a theater, I'm not going to talk about it yet, have been things like Star Wars because it's opening night and you don't want to spoil anything as we're walking through the hallway. There was nobody in the theater and you were like, I don't want to talk about it yet. And I was like, oh, it's that kind of deep. And I felt a fraction of what you felt because I think you have been a real champion for this film and it just, didn't come to play. Do you have any positive Tossi's takes for this week?
I'm gonna go the other side. Prom date of Ben Platt in high school.
Aw.
Beanie Feldstein. You know her from Booksmart, Lady Bird. She's such a good actress, and I'm so excited. She is on Impeachment right now, and she is killing it as Monica Lewinsky. She is just phenomenal in the role, in my opinion. People are going to have their opinions wanting to go in to see this. It's going to be a very divisive show, obviously. Same people that did The People versus O.J. Simpson. Show's really, really interesting to watch. I think it's really well done, but to me, she's the star, and I can't wait to keep seeing what she does, because this is finally her spotlight role, and I think she is just doing a phenomenal job.
No, I totally agree with you. I know the punchlines of that scandal, of course, because I was too young to really know what was going on, so you're just, hearing, sound bites.
Society only knows the punchlines.
Truth be told, yes. This show's it's gonna make you feel icky. There's no two ways about it. I come away uncomfortable, but I come away uncomfortable because I feel like I've gained some knowledge. And that sometimes is not easy to deal with, just kind of inner machinations of White House politics and, how these women were treated in the media is not always easy to watch, but I think important and I think unfortunately timely. But she's great in it. And Sarah Paulson as Linda Tripp. Oh man, is she odious? Yeah, but she does it so well. Yeah, she does. You get mad at her.
Sarah
but
Paulson
she's great.
Never bad.
No, truly she's not.
Yeah. What about you? Please save us some good stuff here.
I only have a good Tossi steak. I cannot recommend enough Nia DaCosta's Candyman. If you are not someone who saw the original Candyman, like me, don't tell anyone.
How could you?
No, it's 100% a how could you. Because I love Tony Todd. I didn't see this because the preview for it or a clip I saw from it had bees coming out of somebody's mouth, and it freaked me out so much I could never watch the movie.
Not the bees.
You know what? We will do a Wicker Man episode one day.
The original, right?
Yes, of course. But this film is incredible. She captures the cold, dizzying architecture of the metropolitan Chicago area. There is such a nuanced argument about gentrification and neighborhoods. It deals with generational trauma in ways that I think is really interesting. Again, I'm not attached to the original source material, so I went in not precious about how they were going to tell this story, but it's so well acted, it's so well crafted. She weaves together a tapestry of commentary that I think feels really important, and it feels, to me, really natural in the events of what's happening in the story. There's also such this interesting meditation on art and who owns pain, and when do we decide how art should be criticized, and who gets to have that say at which point your situation or your pain is quote unquote played out. It is such an elevated look at just the production of art as well, and mental health and trauma, and it's just incredible. It is honestly incredible. It is some serious body horror though. If you got issues with scabs, do not apply to this film. But it's so incredible, and I can't recommend this enough. And the artwork in it is so hauntingly beautiful. I kind of would want it hanging in our house and also not at the same time. It's an incredible film.
Yeah, we talked a lot in the last episode during Texas Chainsaw Massacre about horror films and how beautifully shot they can be, and sometimes hoping that brings in a broader audience. This is another one. I mean, 2021 film, I don't know when it was actually made, probably 2019 at this point, but it's so beautiful. So I'm so glad you chose this, because I'm with you. I saw the original and I still love this. To me, it's as good a, whatever sequel as you can get.
Reboot sequel is the term.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, I think it's probably in the vein of Halloween Kills, probably. Again, we've talked about, that gets brought up a lot, but it's just bringing it to, reinventing it to bring it to another audience, but still connect it to the source material. And I think they do a fantastic job. And it's the first Black female director to ever be number one at the box office, which unfortunately in 2021 shouldn't be something, but it is, and we got to celebrate that, and that's a huge accomplishment that we're excited about.
And 100%, because you have to acknowledge, it can't be possible that it took that long, and it is, but then I think that's just, it speaks to, why, those voices need to be amplified. Why to, make sure that Hollywood is a space where representation is held at its highest. Because, of course it just should be. And then this film is just so incredible. And obviously it's reaching people, like, to especially have box office numbers right now, really dicey time for cinemas. Yeah. It's impressive, and it's such a great film, and I highly recommend people see it.
Yeah, I hate saying a kill can be done in this like really artful way, and she finds a way to do it, and it's
the building sequence.
The building sequence. So when you see it, you'll know.
You'll know. And you'll go, oh damn, that is well shot. But I'm going to take us back to the year 2000. Now, if we're being honest, we've talked a lot about the year in filmmaking, 1999, when we talked about our Oscars episode. And we've had discussions about, is that arguably the best film year? And the year 2000 and the early 2000s in general are not a time period we're really lauding in film criticism just yet. Like, it's not like anyone's super precious about the films that came out during that time. They're not marking it as, or at least in a lot of contemporary conversations about, oh wow, the 2000s were such an achievement in filmmaking. But there's some really interesting films that came out that are contemporaries of the film we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to throw some titles at you, and I'm kind of curious what some of your favorites were from the year 2000. So Memento came out this year.
Every time you say the year 2000, all I can think of is Conan O'Brien. In the year 2000.
Is it out of your system, sir?
Yes.
Do you promise?
Yes.
Because I'm going to say the year 2000 again. All right. In the year 2000.
In the year 2000!
Liar! So this year, Memento came out, Unbreakable, Requiem for a Dream, American Psycho, Gladiator, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Traffic, and Chocolat. Do you have any favorites among those films that came out?
It's a really good, assortment of films. I have a couple of how could yous, with it.
I know one of them.
You probably know Gladiator.
Yes. What's the other one?
Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Dude,
I know.
That movie's so beautiful.
Chocolat and Traffic. I don't know if I've ever seen either of those.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah,
Traffic, you're fine on. Yeah, Chocolat's beautiful.
But the rest, Unbreakable, obviously, I love. American Psycho, one of my all-time favorites.
Is hip to be square.
Memento, you got Nolan really with a unique, vision, showing his unique visionary, really coming on the scene with that. I mean, I know that he had other films, but to me, that's the moment to a much broader audience. He gets, because he has such a unique way of storytelling in it, and it works. It's not a gimmick, and that's a very cool film. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I know is a huge one for you. I love it too.
I love that film so much.
Yeah,
Brother, Where Art Thou? I
always loved you and your dad had always talked about doing the song for your father-daughter dance.
Man of Constant Sorrow. My dad and I used to dance around that song a lot, actually, because I love that. Cool. There's this great, actually the soundtrack for this is great. There's also, there's like a hymnal that's on it, but there's a really cool like cover of a hymnal. It's called As I Went Down to the River to Pray, and it's just, I just really love that story. And honestly, it came out at a time where I was not the audience for that movie. I was 14 years old when that movie came out. I do not think I was the Coen Brothers target demo, but I love that movie deeply.
Really just unique film. I mean, it's taken from Sullivan's Travels. It's the book that he's trying to write, right? And then you have this just unique vision of the Odyssey. Like, it's a cool movie.
Well, let's drop on some literary knowledge.
But it's not the best of 2000.
No, it's not, because it's 100% the movie we're going to be talking about today. So did you just say that this is the best movie of the year 2000?
It is the best movie of the year 2000.
So, Ryan Tocci, I'm going to ask you, how could you not immediately love Almost Famous?
Oh God.
Shame.
Way to put my dirty laundry out on this podcast.
You're welcome.
Why did I start a podcast with you that this could come out? Yes, our listening audience, I have to admit, and I have to say to all of you, that the first time I ever saw Almost Famous, I did not like the movie.
Okay, but you've got to explain yourself here. Like, was it a setting issue? Were you in a poor humor? Did you have dysentery? Like, what was your problem that day?
All right, so short answer. I'll try to talk my way out of this one. So the first time I ever saw it was year 2000, may have been early 2001. I saw it on VHS, like I guess most people, because this did not do well at the box office, which we'll talk about.
Critical success, but box office returns were terrible.
I was on a date. I was a nice girl named Sue.
Peggy Sue. Peggy Sue.
We were at her parents' house, watched this movie, and the movie ends, and I go, that's it.
Oh my gosh. Dude, that's so much worse than just not liking it. You went, that's it? You saw Almost Famous and went, that's it?
I failed all of you.
I'm so upset.
I failed.
Honestly, I knew this.
I failed the audience.
Yes.
I failed you.
Yes.
I failed some nice lady named Sue out there in the world. I failed Cameron Crowe most of all.
Yes, you did.
Can I...
Defend yourself.
Can I get real and defend myself for 1 second?
Of course.
And this might speak to what we were just talking about with some of the 2000 films. So... this is going to be a little deep here, but...
Go for it.
This is a few months after my mom passes away. Okay?
Oh,
that
shit. Now we can't make fun of you anymore about this.
I don't know, where my viewing habits and viewing appreciation was at this point. And I mean that with all honesty. And I think this is why you hear me talk a lot on this show about go and watch movies 2 or 3 times, even if you don't like it. Give it a second chance, especially if there's something that it's got a good word of mouth, but you didn't appreciate it, or, there was something in it that you liked, like a small part, or it's a director or an actor that you like, but you're like, I didn't give them a second chance. And I believe in that, and this is where this stems from, because this is a perfect example of it. This is a movie, I saw it, but I was in a weird headspace in my life at that time, so the movie didn't connect. I'm watching it, middle of the day, bright sunny living room on a small VHS, TV screen, still trying, kind of where I'm at. It didn't hit the way it should have. It didn't speak to me the way it should have.
And I can completely understand that. You talking about the circumstances, I do think this is a film that you have to receive with some level of wonder or sense of self-discovery. I do think this is something that it's not without its heft, but I think leans towards something that's a little bit more rose-colored, as we'll get into a little bit later. But I can kind of understand that. I mean, I still say feck you for not loving it the first time.
Did you say what's the difference between
the letter U?
Yeah. No, listen. There's no good excuse.
This movie... But you threw down a reason that actually makes a lot of sense to me.
This movie is an all-time classic. I'm gonna... Let me put you at ease. Again, listening audience. I love this movie. This movie keeps getting better every time I see it. It is an all-time classic. I promise you I love it. Audience... I feel ashamed that I did not like it the first time. I feel bad that it took a couple of viewings until it really started to speak to me, until that emotional center hit right at me. It shouldn't have. It does now, and that's what's important. So
I have to ask, at that point in time, were you a Cameron Crowe fan yet, or is that come later for you?
It comes later.
Okay.
I got introduced around that time to him.
Okay.
Probably year prior, I see Say Anything for the first time.
Oh,
and, great. That movie just, I could talk all day about. So, it wasn't until probably earlier, a couple of years later, that I start getting into more his full, filmography and start to really love his movies.
Well, and that makes sense too, because...
Or the appreciation of him as a director, I guess I should say.
No, and that makes a lot of sense, because, obviously we talked about this during, Fast Times at Ridgemont High versus Dazed and Confused episode, about our love of Cameron Crowe, our mutual love of Cameron Crowe, and I can kind of understand, if you weren't really discovering his films, this one didn't hit. It's interesting because I know what a huge Cameron Crowe fan you are, so it's the trajectory of that I always find fascinating, because it wasn't something you liked on first glance, but you would have already seen Say Anything, and Say Anything obviously is incredible. Has such wonderfully written characters. It feels so
And I hate to bring this up, but I don't mean this, again, this is just talks about headspace of where you're at. I see Say Anything for the first time a few months before my mom passes away.
Okay, yeah,
so it's on the front end of that, you know, this time in my life, you know, where it's, you know, I'm speaking, like, we were talking about these movies, like American Psycho, you know, or, you know, Unbreakable. These types of movies are speaking to me more during that time than these emotional, you know, films, because just where I'm at. The year prior, I'm seeing Say Anything, and it's making me believe in love for the first time. Like, it's just this movie that just hits all the notes that it needs to at that time.
Well, and I think that's something that I really appreciate about Cameron Crowe as a director, because I think he makes you believe, and obviously, because we've talked about this on the show before, like, he makes you believe in kind of like the hopefulness of new experiences, whether that be love or adventure or travel or, you know, overcoming loss. Like, I think that's something that he really hits on. And you and I, you know, like something like Elizabethtown, it's not necessarily probably one of his like biggest hitters, but, you know, that, or like We Bought a Zoo, like he deals and experiments in like loss in that way. And like, how do you look at that with seeing new beginnings in a place where maybe you don't want to feel those? And Almost Famous is all about like those self-discovery moments. It's interesting because I feel like if you saw Almost Famous a few months prior, your feelings are different. You're a freshman in college, and like this probably hits differently.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not afraid to say that I, you know, have about 3 different versions of myself, you know, within about a 6-year period of life, you know, where it's before 2000 to the after that. And so seeing, you know, when you see films is a huge piece of how they speak to you.
Well, and I'll say, because like my experience with this film is entirely different, you know, so I see this in the year 2000, and this, you know, kind of sets my imagination on fire. Like you know, when people talk about like icons of like different periods of time, and like, you know, people you want like posters on your wall of, and like, you know, I think about like your Marilyn Monroes, your Audrey Hepburns, like, you know, I think about like those like figures they talk about, those iconic like feminine figures that we attach onto. Like, well, mine was Penny Lane. Like, I see this in the early 2000s now. My brother, who is phenomenally a lot cooler than I am and knows so much about music, it's ridiculous, always had copies of the Rolling Stone, like, everywhere in our house. Like, and he had, like, stacks and stacks of them. And stacks of concert tickets he went to. So, like, I had this, like, attraction to music, but I completely understood that was, like, not my forte. Like, I loved film.
Yeah.
And, like...
Because you're uncool.
I am forever uncool. But, like, I think there was always, like, kind of this attraction, though, to, like, music and concert experiences. Like, and I think what I loved so much about this film is, to me, everything that's, like, entrancing about that world was, like, distilled into this one film. And, like, the character of Penny Lane, in her whimsy and in her sadness and in her ability to be so uniquely and authentically herself, I mean, that speaks to you when you're younger. Like, you see this person who seems unencumbered by anxiety, unencumbered by like feeling like she has to fit this mold, like she was her whole own thing. And it was, to me, like, that character spoke to me, not because I was her at all. I'm a lot more William, a lot more uncle, and let's be, at this point in my life, I'm a lot more Elaine, like, you know, but at that, like, there was something just about her that was so magnetic, and that it was like hard not to fall in love with her and like want to idolize like her being, because it felt, there's a veracity to this film. I think it's the thing that, if not that I think anyone would ever make me defend why I love this movie so much, because you don't want that kind of rant from me, but there's a veracity to the filmmaking of this that I think is why the character of Penny Lane like rings so true, even though I didn't know anyone like her, but she feels so real, she feels so like present, she's like this like dreamlike figure in my mind that like exists in this film. And it's like, I just love thinking about like Penny Lane, like traveling the world, you know, like she's just, and you know, obviously this comes from, so Cameron Crowe, 15 years old, cutting his teeth on a tiny little publication, the Rolling Stone, you know, traveling the world with rock bands.
He's just a unique individual, right? Like,
Cameron Crowe's hard to put a pin on.
But I love, that's what's great about his writing, though, is because it's so authentic. And we'll talk a lot about, probably use that word a lot when we talk about this movie. But, you know, just when he writes himself, he writes what he knows. It is just masterclass.
Well, and I think that what's so cool about this, because like, so something that got said to him once was that a criticism of the film was like, oh, well, you're really like, this is like the rose-colored glasses version of rock and roll. And he went, yeah, that's what I was going for. Like, Cameron Crowe has spoken about this, that he feels like really at like the kind of earliest point of like that decadence rock that we tend to associate with the 70s, like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and that like whole like gambit. Like, he said there was a real like naive sense and an innocence to that beginning part where it really was about the music, and it was touring and it was the music, and yeah, there were people who were there for that, but it wasn't, the real musicians weren't really there for those like more scandalous parts that we associate with like 70s rock. Like, they were really there for the music itself. And he wanted to capture that. He wanted it to feel as innocent as it could feel, to just really love something so much and really be so dedicated to it that you just kind of devote your entire life to it. Like what we see with so many of the characters in this film, whether they're musicians or not. And one of the things I find so fascinating about this, because he's so unabashedly like writes himself into this film in all of like the awkwardness of what it felt like probably to be a 15-year-old hanging out with rock stars. Like, it's kind of why it's such a like an incredible testament to like when we put our, you've said this before about Cameron Crowe, you've said before, he puts his heart out on the page, and it's like, this is a case study in why that can be so important. This is why this gets to be a classic. It's why people are obsessed with Penny Lane. It's why you'd be really hard pressed to find someone who doesn't love this movie. It's why all of these performances, you know, that he's able to get from this group of actors are so incredible, because it's done with so much truth. It's done with so much like sense of experience.
Yeah, I mean, he had an embarrassment of riches of actors in this movie.
Dude.
He just,
right?
But I agree with you, you know, on all of that. You know, this movie to me, or doing this show, I don't know if I was as nervous about another show of us doing it as this one, because I know how much this movie means to you.
Sure.
I know how much this movie means to a lot of people. This movie really, it is one of the we're hyperbolic all the time, but I'm gonna say it is one of the all-time best films. And I don't think I don't think I'm, you know, saying anything completely, you know, crazy here with that. I don't think it's a hot take or anything, but like I said earlier, like, it gets better every time, and I truly mean that. Like, this movie's 21 years old now, and I'm not sitting there saying that's, you know, it's getting there in its age, but everything, and it's a period piece, right? But it still hits every note you want the entire time you're going through it.
And I think like we didn't even realize we were doing this. There's like a real 70s theme so far to like this season of our podcast, I think, like, unwillingly, and do we have to keep that going? I think we might have to now that I've kind of like identified it. But I think the thing that, you know, rings true with this is like, there's such a sense of like being inside. So, you know, Cameron Crowe, by his own admission, so he's like traveling around. I think he was like in a lot of these experiences come when he was like with the Allman Brothers, like in Japan. A sentence I just said. And he like pulls a lot of his experiences, and like, I think about like the place in which this film starts. So we start with like young William, you know, with Frances McDormand, like as his mom, which, if I'm being honest, if we ever had Spawn, I think I'd probably have big Elaine energy.
Yes. I believe that may be true.
100%. I'm like, her parenting makes sense to me. I don't think
be a little more into the arts, though. You would allow the kids to have it.
Like, dabble, but you better study first. And I just really love, like, kind of how we meet this family. I love the character of Elaine. She's so well-spoken. She's so earnest. Like, there's no sense of irony in the way in which she's trying to, like, help her children to educate themselves. And she is someone who, like, takes, like, knowledge very seriously and values education. And, like, so obviously that's going to sing for me. And I just love this, like, kind of opening. I think Anita, as played by Zooey Deschanel, is, like, one of the best older siblings ever in a movie.
Agreed.
She's so great.
Completely. You know, talking about Elaine, you know, again, using the word authentic, which will probably overuse, you know, this is Cameron Crowe's mom, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, everything you read, that's what this character was written like, and everything that I can tell, this is her. Like, you know, and it's a cool character. It's really interesting because it's not and I hate saying it because it's based off of a real person, but it's like, it's not like anybody else any other mom we've ever seen. And because, like you're talking about, she loves her kids. She actually is very, progressive in many ways.
Yeah.
I mean, she moves William up a couple of years in school just so
11!
Yeah, he can travel the world. She wants him to see things. Like, so she's not sheltering in many ways, but at the same token, she is. It's a really cool character.
Well, and I think the cool thing with her too is like, based off of Cameron Crowe's mom. So like Cameron Crowe's mom was like on set, and he just was like very much like, please don't bother Frances McDormand.
Heard he didn't want them to meet because he didn't want Frances McDormand getting any ideas either how to play the part.
And the only criticism the mom had is because at one point Frances McDormand is walking around barefoot. She's like, I don't want people to think I walk around without shoes on.
That's fantastic. Which sounds very Elaine.
It sounds 100% Elaine. And
his mom actually does a cameo in the movie. She's giving out the diplomas during the graduation
Oh,
scene.
seriously?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which I didn't even realize, like, how significant that scene is supposed to be. I think because, like, when I watched this as a youth, like, Elaine's character was charming and interesting to me, but otherwise, like, unimportant. And obviously with age, like, I'm like, oh, wow, it's, like, really sad that she does that because, like, for her, it's, like, this is kind of closing the chapter where they're learning from me. They're now learning from the world. And how sad that closure must feel at the graduation scene. I've never felt that when I saw it before, but I did this time.
This is going back to when we talked about Clueless, and we were like, we're now relating to the father character more.
Right. I've got a 45 and a shovel. I doubt anyone would miss you. But I love like the little bits of wisdom that she drops in. I love how she says, who put such a high capital on being typical? I love that there's so much about her parenting style that is pushing her kids to be authentic. But also I would think the push and pull that comes with, I want you to be authentic, but also do I want you traveling around with rock stars at like 17 years old? Probably not. Like there's an interesting push and pull in that of being like the progressive parent, but also being the parent who still feels the same anxiety as any parent would with certain like things like this. And I think we get to see as we transition into like the, obviously the William, the Patrick Fugit like section of this film, we get to see like kind of like the portions that he's taken. He obviously gets his love of music from his sister who like, essentially wants to like give him an education through the albums that she loves. And, for the kind of like tenacity of his mother obviously being why he's able to pursue the things he's able to pursue because like of how she is. And we get into this section now. We have this great transition where you get to see his binders all covered with like band names and his progression. And then we get Lester Bangs.
Oh my God, right?
The next hour is about Lester Bangs.
Let's just do a whole episode on Philip Seymour Hoffman in this.
I'll ask before we get into this, because this is obviously can be a top role for him. Do you have top Philip Seymour Hoffman roles, like the ones that you're like really passionate about his performance?
Listen, Philip Seymour Hoffman, an all-time actor, right?
Yes,
and we're going to say
100%.
that. We all know that, you ask this question, and we give a little bit of sometimes some things that we're going to talk about, so be prepared. And I don't know, because every role he's in, like, because you asked me this question, and my first is, The Master. Just, but then it's like, I don't know, Lester Bangs. But then I'm like, well, then I want to go back to all of his, like, side roles that made him a star. Twister and Boogie Nights. Like, I mean, hell, the movie Along Came Polly is one of the worst movies I've ever seen, and he is brilliant in it.
You and I quote his lines from Along Came Polly thanks to a weekend in Ocean City, Maryland, where we watched this movie like 5 times in a row. It felt like it kept being on the TV. It just kept being on.
It's like back when HBO would just rerun movies like 18 times in a day.
Because whatever he's in, he feels like obviously the person I should be paying attention to.
You and I just saw Talented Mr. Ripley in the theater the other day, and like how good
on 35 millimeter.
Yes, like how good is he in that? Like just everything.
Genius.
And he's a chameleon. I mean, from Capote to, again, the Twister. And I mean, for me, put anything that Paul Thomas Anderson directed him in probably leads. But this role.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. You're the Oscar expert in this duo. Did he get nominated for this?
I actually don't believe he did.
What
I have to double. Yeah,
I don't know who got nominated, but to me, I don't know if there's ever been another movie that I watched 20 some years later going, this is an Oscar-worthy performance. Yeah. This is what Best Supporting Actor roles was made for,
Because he wins for Capote. He was nominated previously for The Master, Doubt, and Charlie Wilson's War. And I do think but I also think the Academy...
Oh, he's really good in Doubt. I mean,
yes.
He's good. I mean...
He's great in everything. Yeah. And that's why it's, hard to have a conversation about Philip Seymour Hoffman that's, has any breadth.
You can't give a top performance. It feels like... Every performance is my favorite performance.
And the thing I'll say is, so Philip Seymour Hoffman actually didn't want...
But for today's purpose, Lester Bangs.
Yeah, Lester Bangs, 100%. But it's interesting how he gets this part. So he didn't want to audition for it. He didn't want to read for it. So he made this, thing. I'm not reading for Lester Bangs. So he comes into the quote-unquote audition and just rants about a billboard he saw of Martin Scorsese as he's driving in and how, the commodification of, our artists that used to be, our edgy artists, that's how he gets the part. Because they said he so encapsulated, Lester Bangs' passion for things. And it's really interesting. He had a phenomenally interesting relationship with Cameron Crowe on set. So Cameron Crowe, as is talked about a lot with the production of this, did a lot of takes. He really felt passionately about this. He wanted to make sure they had it. And he kind of pushed the actors. Really great relationships with the actors. And they all speak, super highly of him. But with Philip Seymour Hoffman... There was a sequence in when they're in the record studio, your first big Lester Bangs scene, where he started playing Iggy Pop. So Cameron Crowe would do this, and back on Jerry Maguire, Tom Cruise thought that was great that he would throw records on to kind of set the mood because Cameron Crowe's musical knowledge is so incredibly vast. Well, so he plays Iggy Pop, and Philip Seymour Hoffman yells "cut." And he goes, what makes you think that the song you're playing right now is better than the one I was playing in my head? And this kind of marks their relationship. He was... So they say that Philip Seymour Hoffman was incredibly protective of Patrick Fugit, was not easy on him, but was incredibly protective of him. Wanted to make sure that he had a good experience, would give him notes, would talk to him, this was a good take, this was a bad take. Because we got to remember, Patrick Fugit's only 15 when he's playing
right,
his
and this
part.
is his first role, right? First major film role, right?
Well, I think it was his first film role, period. I may be mistaken, but I don't think he had done anything else significant. And part of,
So we're not going to do our top 10 Patrick Fugit roles.
No, we're not. But,
this and Gone Girl.
He is. I do like him in Gone Girl.
Really good.
Yeah. But I just think that's an interesting way in which, Philip Seymour Hoffman ends up in this film and so perfect for it because you need someone. I mean, he has the most important line in the film. The only true currency in this bankrupt world is what you share with someone else when you're uncool. It's the most important line in the movie.
Damn good line.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it's it's so emblematic, I think, of relationships that are genuine because it has to be the people who love you and at all your points in life. And he's such the sage in this. It's interesting because you have all of these other rock stars that William should be learning from, but the true sage in this is Lester Bangs. And it's such an incredible performance.
And he 4 days of filming, had the flu the entire time.
Which, can you imagine giving that performance with the flu?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, again, I don't know how much screen time he actually has, but...
It's not terribly long.
Yeah, again, you can't state it enough. It's an actor that we just, anybody that passes too early is devastating. We as, film lovers really lost, what I think that career just would have kept rising and rising. And yeah, it's a shame. It's one of, I was literally, as we were watching it the other night, I got sad. Because just how amazing he is and everything. And just when you're watching him speak to William in these parts, you just are so engaged and listening to every word, and it feels like he's speaking to you.
And because it feels like a meditation on the passion of fandom, and I love that the advice he gives, because I think it's advice that's applicable outside of even the publishing world, make your reputation on being honest, and how important that is. I feel like he's just teaching us all these life lessons throughout, and I would especially think of course, like Cameron Crowe probably had to hard fought those lessons must have been like for him, like being in this world so young. But there's just, and you saying that about Philip Seymour Hoffman, Gone Too Soon, 100%. Like he's such an incredible actor, and the performances we have from him are so,
I don't
remarkable.
know if I don't know what Lester Bangs was like in real life, so I'm saying...
I don't either, no. Yeah, I only read a little bit. I will say, so some of the research that I'm pulling from this today and some of the things we've talked about, there is a podcast called Origins. Don't listen to them, listen to us, because we want the likes, not them. But if you are going to listen to them, they did a 6-part series on the 20th anniversary of Almost Famous, and they actually got all of the actors and Cameron Crowe to come back to do interviews for it. So a lot of the research we're pulling is directly from that, because there were some really phenomenal stories in that, which we'll continue to pepper in throughout the episode, because there's just so many cool things about the production of this film. But where we leave Lester Bangs temporarily is we get introduced to the world of the Band-Aids and the don't take drugs.
Right.
It's just good advice.
That's good advice. Our friend John the other day told us a story about how he yelled at his daughter dropping her off.
Good advice. And one day she'll know the film reference. I also just love like how green we get to see that William is. Like so much knowledge, but he has like no know-how of like how to get backstage at a show. I mean, I don't either.
Lester left him hanging on that, right?
He really did. Yeah, do you think you could have given him like some like sort of tip of like this is how you infiltrate the backstage area at a show?
If he gets in, he doesn't meet the Band-Aids. He doesn't get in green with Stillwater.
Oh, and then you get that great like introduction to the Band-Aids. It kind of look like the Droogs like standing at the end of the ramp.
What a way to describe them.
Very different vibe, though. Yeah. So I'll ask, obviously Penny Lane is the best, but do you have a favorite Band-Aid?
Well, who you got? Anna Paquin is
Polexia,
right? Yeah. And then Bijou Phillips is there. But my favorite would probably be Sapphire, which is Fairuza Balk.
Yeah, she's great. Why is she your favorite, though?
Because she's Fairuza Balk.
Okay, you know what? I feel like this 100% could be a BuzzFeed quiz, and you would just click to get Fairuza Balk, and I definitely would just click to get Penny Lane.
No, I think, world building, right? These are semi-minor characters that are huge to build the entire, world that we're in. I think Fairuza Balk feels, realistic in it. Like, it doesn't feel like acting. Doesn't feel like she's putting a part on. She feels like somebody that feels like should be this character. Like, you kind of, even if you don't know this world, you've never been in it, if you're thinking of a Band-Aid or a groupie or however you want to describe it.
It's a Band-Aid!
Fairuza Balk just kind of, and I like that she's, there's a maturity to her, right? Like, she's buying into the whole Penny Lane thing. What's
that with the tone? I didn't like how you said that.
There's a respect that she has, and I like that.
And here's the thing. I think Penny Lane may have revolutionized the notion of calling themselves Band-Aids, but I 100% think Fairuza Balk is the person who, like, shepherds them through this process. And I think Penny Lane probably learned from her character, like,
right, it's the first commander,
world.
Right? Like,
And, I love, this sequence is probably one of my favorites in the film, and it happens early, and I could probably, I'll probably end up saying that about 50 more times with the rest of the episode, but I love the introduction into this world. The camera moves like you are inside of this world. The music's incredible. We get that song by Yes, Your Move, as they're coming into, like, the backstage area. And then you get this phenomenal first quote-unquote introduction or re-meeting between Penny Lane and Russell Hammond. Russell Hammond, not the lead singer, the lead guitarist of the fictional band Stillwater.
Russell Hammond, who's it's supposed to be taken from Glenn Frey, right?
Yes, of the Eagles.
Yes.
And I think Jeff Beebe is supposed to be taken from the lead singer of Bad Company.
Got it. Okay.
I think those are the inspiration points because Cameron Crowe, knew both gentlemen from touring around. And you have this great moment where at first, like, William thinks they're meeting each other for the first time. And there's a wonderful story behind how this was shot. So it wasn't supposed to be this drawn out. What actually happened was on set, Cameron Crowe was playing the song The Promise. And I guess that day he had been kind of hard on Kate Hudson and her performance. Like, he said she wasn't focusing enough. Like that whole scene where she says to William, "How old are we?" But how old are we really? I guess he didn't feel like she was focused enough. And so when she went to go shoot the portion with Russell, she found she was a little like kind of in her head. And he started playing the song The Promise by Bruce Springsteen. And she got really emotional because this film, and this does not happen often, was shot in sequence. So she already knew like where this relationship was going. But this is the first moment. And just thinking about it, she started crying. And when they were shooting this, the camera was on Russell. It was doing Russell's half of the take. And Cameron Crowe kind of stopped after the take and was like, "What's going on?" And she's like, "I don't know. I'm just emotional." Like, so then he put on Joni Mitchell's The River. And, or it's just called River, not The River. And she said it happened all again on her side. And it's like this really brilliant moment knowing that behind, because what I feel like you see in that moment is they know where this is going, yet they're embarking to do it again. Yeah. Like almost like, it feels almost like reincarnation. Like they know that this is going to end with hurt feelings and broken hearts, but they're just so magnetically attracted to each other. They have no other option but just to do it all over again.
It's like Hadestown, right? Like,
oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh, yeah. And so you have, and I just think that it's such like a beautifully grounded moment. It's one of my favorite moments in the film, and getting to know that production story behind it, it only enhances that for me.
I think that's a really cool story. It speaks to, because she feels, when she's, those tears feel real. So to know that story, I think only enhances that scene. And I just love, Crowe does such a great job of really bouncing back and forth between the three. Russell's not doing much. He's stoic. And then the emotion just building up to her. And then you have, poor William here.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
Who's just, just thinks he's doing this, like, amazing thing of meeting, introducing these two. And him kind of, realizing what's going on a little bit. Like, it's done very well. And I like, her emotion in that scene makes it.
Yeah, and then you get, this great moment where you get to see, them kind of go onto the stage. The camera moves behind them. You get to see the circle.
One of my favorite shots of the movie is them walking to the stage and William trying to keep up. And, you get just these flashes of the tape, and they're you're doing that tracking shot of following on the footsteps of the band and William following behind. And then, yes, you get that cool scene where they pull him in to the huddle, which comes from actually something that happened to Cameron Crowe.
Oh, seriously?
It wasn't when he was a kid like that, but it was actually when he was at Lollapalooza with Pearl Jam. Eddie Vedder pulled him into the circle. And, he would end up going on and doing the documentary on Pearl Jam later, but...
Can you just imagine Eddie Vedder pulling you into a circle, their hype circle, to get ready for a show?
Well, that's I think the thing with Cameron Crowe that's always really interesting, we play a lot with the uncool aspect. And I think that is him. I think he's William to a T. And I don't think he's ever lost that, which allows him to keep, being the writer and the director he is. But he's lived such a cool life, right?
Yeah.
These moments, these people that he's known, heck, he married,
Nancy Wilson.
Yeah. Which we didn't even talk about in Fast Times, because she was in Fast Times, and then he goes on to, marry her later. The two of them write the songs for Stillwater. So they wrote Fever Dog.
Do you know when they wrote those songs?
On their wedding.
Their honeymoon,
right?
Yeah.
In Oregon.
Yeah. In Oregon, like years before this movie ever gets made.
It's obviously this piece of work that's so meaningful to him. But I love that shot of them going on. And then, to be able to... Concert scenes have to be so difficult, I think, to shoot. But he does you feel the massive success that's that they are, like feel like you're on in that concert with them.
Yeah, and I think like that's something actually is like Billy Crudup, and again on this podcast Origins, like talked about like, now this was a scene later when after he gets like really freaked out by talking to Elaine on the phone, and they do that same take, and it's like shot from behind, and it's actually them at the Palladium. And he said, like, it felt like being a rock star. He said there was an energy. It kind of gave you, like, a high, like, just, like, having that experience. And I think the thing that Crowe really captures is you get this feeling that this is exactly what's being described. This is a band that's, like, on the come up. Like, this is their third album. They're getting a following. Like, people have already started kind of, objectifying the Russell Hammond figure in the band, which definitely pisses off Jeff Beebe, which is hilarious. He says like later on, like, your looks are becoming a problem. Like, it's just like you get to see kind of them at like what feels like is the start of that ascent towards the peak, like, right? Like that intense amount of fame, and you get to feel like you're inside of it. And I think that's so important for us to see William get to do that. And then additionally, like getting to be a partner in that is, you get that being on the fringe of it, like watching, and why people would want to follow around this lifestyle. Like, why does Penny Lane want to follow this group around? It's because you love the music, because you share this passion. And like, one of the things I think is really cool about her character and Russell's like relationship and chemistry is that they both just so deeply care and love the music. Like, it's not about her loving his rock god status, because like he's definitely that person who realizes like he's nothing but the epitome of a rock star, everything you want, super good looking, super talented, super charismatic on stage, but he like doesn't want to be that. Like, no, don't look at me. Like, he doesn't, he's there for the music, but there's this like push and pull with that of like this conflict clearly inside of him as gets expressed later. But it's just so incredible to get to see this moment, and the concert sequences. Like, I agree with you. I can't think those are easy to shoot authentically.
Do we know, did they shoot them at real concerts?
They did. So not the extras. Some of the extras are digitally created. But most of what you see up front, they were at concert venues. Probably like the concert at the Palladium was the one where they had the most extras for to really feel that. And that's that experience that Billy Crudup talks about on that podcast. But what's cool about it is I think they tried to make sure that when the audiences, when you're seeing them, that it feels like genuine. They're rocking along to the music. There's like good energy to it. Like, so I think it's filmed like as genuinely as those scenes can be. It doesn't feel forced. It feels like I'm actually just seeing a concert. Which is cool.
Yeah, and my understanding is they played the music, right? Is that
they did? So
Jason Lee didn't actually sing.
He didn't. They had to go to essentially like what I think Cameron Crowe referred to as like rock and roll high school or rock and roll school. And like, because they wanted them to
School of Rock
or School of Rock. He wanted it to feel like as authentic as possible. And like, so they're playing the guitar riffs, but they're not singing, which, is because they, obviously Jason Lee didn't have the sound that they were looking for, and they wanted a particular feel to like Stillwater, which is interesting because actually was a band called Stillwater in the 70s.
Yeah, and they had to get their approval.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
Which they gave. It's funny too, if you go on the uncool.com and like look at stuff with Almost Famous, there's actually like a fake history of the band, and you can like see where all of the members of Stillwater, what bands they were in previously that get them to Stillwater. There's also a thing in there that eventually like the band becomes really famous and they make an animated series about the band Stillwater. And there's like cartoon drawings like down at the bottom. It's actually pretty funny like how deep he went into like the trying to create like a history profile for them.
Rolling Stone just recently put out the article. So they recreated the William article and put it out with the cover, as if it was a real. So it's cool how this movie, the life of this keeps going.
Because I think for anyone who loves this film, there's a reality to it. Again, like I said this at the beginning, there's a veracity at which the story is told that you feel like you're really watching rock history. Like, if someone told me Stillwater was based on like 100% just one real band, I would have believed it. Now it's an amalgamation of all of the bands that he toured with and those experiences. But I think because so much of this was Cameron Crowe's experiences, like down to the deflowering scene. Like, think he
didn't get that in my notes.
So as he said in an interview, he was like, it wasn't scored as well but it did happen. So like, I think because of that, again, that authenticity, you get to feel like this is something that like, even when the fake article is being published in the Rolling Stone, doesn't it feel real? Like, don't these characters feel so fully formed?
Well, it's so much. We were talking about the, Cameron Crowe and Nancy Wilson writing on when you see the soundtrack, it shows if Fever Dog is on there, and I apologize, the other name is escaping me at the moment, but the credits give it to Russell Hammond and Stillwater,
which is so cool,
right? Like, so yeah, they essentially created a real band. Like, I think. I mean, it's got to be one of the best all-time film fake bands. Right?
Yeah, no, for sure.
If not the best. I mean...
Second is the Oneaters.
Nice.
But, like, and I think that, like, you're talking about, like, kind of that commitment
What about the Pinheads from Back to the Future?
Oh, okay. They're third. They're third. It's a bad band.
They were good, man.
At least the Wonders were good. Like, they had that one-hit wonder. But I think that's also the intentionality of making this world building so... we talk so much in, like, fantasy or, like, big sci-fi epics about, like, how important world building is. But we also don't talk about, like, in personal stories like this and, like, particularly period pieces, which this definitively is, like... things have to feel genuine. And like, I know there was a lot written of like Betsy Hyman, who was the costume designer for this. Like, she really made sure to pull pieces. A lot of the stuff that like Lester Bangs wears, actually Cameron Crowe's t-shirts from the 70s. I think the Who shirt is the one that's like Cameron Crowe's. But like and the art direction.
The records are all Cameron Crowe's
in
the movie. Like,
it truly feels like we've been invited into like the trunk of memories that he collected and all of like the physical pieces that come along with that. And I think that's what makes it so important, because you kind of get to see how immersive this world felt if you lived inside of it is really a credit to like, or that coming through for the audience is a credit to like every piece of this film feels fully formed. Like every character, like Penny Lane is such a complex protagonist. Like, she is someone who they show in, as we'll get towards the end of the film, like show in all of the arrays of sadness and beauty and excitement and whimsy and like how clever she is and how smart she is and how passionate she is. And then like all of that, as it's distilled in these very many characters of having equally complex personalities, then you have these sets where it's like every little glass feels like authentic, like every cigarette butt, every scarf that's being draped over a lamp, everything feels so authentic to the experience that you get to really feel like this did happen. This does feel real. I feel like I'm really with them.
We talked a lot about this with Dazed, right? Where period pieces, and when you do period pieces and how they age, right? Like, so this is a movie, again, we're talking 21 years ago. It was a movie, that was done in 2000, about the 70s. And you couldn't tell when it was done. And I think, that's really speaks to, the longevity of a film, right? Like, you need to be able to feel like that world could exist at any time. And even though it's speaking about a certain time in history, like, I wouldn't know if that movie was made in the 70s or in the 2000s or today. That's a real testament to, like you said, the set design, to the actors, to the writing, every aspect.
Well, and I think the, like, unity of the band, too. Like, there's something very authentic about their successes and their shorthand with each other and their squabbles. Like, when the t-shirts come in. And you can very clearly see Russell, and the rest of them are just blurbs in the background. And you get that great line for Russell that just feels like something you would say to your best friends, like, can we skip the vibe and get to the part where we just start laughing about this? Right. Does that not feel so like how someone would try and diffuse the situation? Or like, and just you see like kind of where those slights come from. Like, Jeff has reason to feel like he is being somewhat sidelined. He talks about, we had this agreement. Right. I was the charismatic frontman. You were the guitarist with mystery.
Yeah, right. You said about the t-shirt, it made me think though, that Cameron Crowe actually was almost in a plane crash twice. One of them was he was flying with I believe it was the Who. He was flying with their t-shirt people, like their merchandise. Geez. And I guess the guy wanted to get to the next city quickly because he had met a groupie or a Band-Aid and was trying to, and almost crashed. They had to actually land in, Tupelo, excuse
Tupelo,
me.
yeah.
So that's why that's why that particular city is actually written into.
Oh, that's so crazy. Yeah. What a weird, oh my gosh, Cameron Crowe, geez Louise. But, and like that, just thinking about like capturing that moment, well, because he can write that authentically because he was in it.
Right.
Like, you can write that scene later on. But I also love, even before you get to the explosion, like getting to know these characters more intimately, like the Russell Hammond character is so incredible. Like, you have this kind of vulnerability of him saying to William, just make us look cool, and that feels very earnest because of the fact he's like, we don't want to look like we're some stupid middling band. Like there's real talent here, but someone's going to have to make us look that way for people to really be attracted to our sound. Like, I think there's a really interesting
actual line said by Glenn Frey to Cameron Crowe.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's kind of why. What? Oh, all the layers.
Yeah.
But like, I love that about Russell, because then you kind of get this extrapolated, I think, further in like the Golden God sequence. Like, you have someone like Russell needs followers. He needs fans. He needs to be kind of fluffed up, but like completely acts like he's the opposite of that. Like he doesn't need adoration. Like, but he clearly does. There's something that people are just attracted to him. You see him, when they're in, is it Topeka? When he goes to the house.
Some real people.
Like, and he goes to the house. And I mean, like, he's sitting court kind of like, I mean, it looks like Charles Manson. Like, like, it feels like he's got these people who are really, like, paying attention to him. And it's not that his bandmates don't do that. And it's not that the fans aren't. It's just he needs to feel that his experiences are real and true, but also not understanding there's an element of vanity to the things that he does, and trying to balance that vanity of wanting to be a rock and roll star while also still being committed to the music. I just think it's a really interesting interplay.
Yeah, and that seems so important to the relationship, I think, with Willie, because I think at that point, it's the pained artist, right?
Yes.
That has that so much. And we only are getting a glimpse of it, because we're seeing it through William's eyes, and he's seeing it behind the door, right? Penny's protecting him. You just hear those tidbits of him yelling, like, I'm too honest today.
Yeah.
Those types of things.
Go
and
away.
It all comes to a head right in front of, and William has to come to grips with that. And I think that's such a really good, because he starts to see everything unravel all the way up to the point where Russell essentially turns on him at the very end, even though William has protected him as best he could all night. This 15-year-old kid.
Well, he has it's like a bad acid trip, essentially, because he freaks out.
Right.
Well, it's funny too. There's a funny thing with that. So Patrick Fugit grew like 4 inches during filming, and so Billy Crudup is actually standing on an apple crate when he goes to attack him in the house during his bad acid trip, because and they even made a joke to Patrick, like, you have to stop growing. I also think, like, to take a moment to pause here, like Patrick Fugit. It's like innocence and being kind of the person that we follow through this process, like kind of wanting to be him because he gets to be inside, but also feeling that distance he has. As much as they make him apart, there is this, he's in this different category because he's media, because he's press, because he's so young and inexperienced and not there for the exact, like, love of the music, sure, but he wants to document that love and experience and not just experience it. His performance is so wonderful because he doesn't have really until the play in like very big dramatic moments, but he does all of these things that you understand how unnerving most of these experiences must be. How much he's enjoying it, but how unnerving it is at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
Because someone attacking you after they're having a bad acid trip is kind of unnerving.
It's not good. I mean, most of the time when that happens to me, I'm just a little thrown off for the rest of the day.
And I like that he gets so, like, situated with Russell, because I think, like, Jeff probably would have eventually embraced him if, like, Jeff became, like, kind of the object of, like, mystery of, like, I need to get this interview, because, like, Jeff's great. Like, I love when they leave him behind at the bathroom and he's like, oh, that's okay, I'm only the lead singer, And, like, Jeff's just much more honest, I think, about what he wants in terms of fame and that, but, like, we see William so drawn to this character who's kind of damaged and complex, but he's like so much more drawn to like his story and getting to get that story out of Russell. Jason
Lee's funny in this movie because like he doesn't feel like he should be in this movie, and
no,
and I think it sounds more. We love Jason Lee, like he's fantastic, but like, it doesn't feel like he should be in this type of role in this, but he does it so well because he plays it to perfection. Because you're like you said, like, you can understand all of his jealousy.
Yeah.
Like, he's supposed to be the guy, and you see it from, again, even from William's standpoint. He sees it on the bus, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't come to the lead singer first. He comes to Russell first, right? And that just sets it off right from the beginning, and that's why he can never see him as anything but the enemy, because he already has a distrust for him of where he's going to go with whatever he writes.
Oh, no, completely. And like, and we also see how much probably gets like service towards making Russell feel appeased in some ways. Like, even if they're not meaning to do it, it just happens. Like, I mean, look at the Golden God sequence. Like, you get the bus sequence, which, I mean, let's be honest, like, got to be in the top 5 best musical sequences ever committed to film.
I was
right?
wondering when we were getting to it, right? Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know if there's a better one, honestly. I mean, that scene, again, we talk about mini scenes in movies.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's a mini film right there. I mean, from every person on that bus, you feel what they're thinking. You know what they're thinking in that moment. Yeah. The coming together, and then you have this special moment between William and Penny.
Which was ad-libbed.
Was it?
Yeah, Cameron Crowe was just throwing lines at them to see what worked.
Wow. That's, I mean, it's a beautiful moment. You know, from, you know, just her resting her head and that beautiful shot. And I heard Patrick Fugit was terrible singer. And so they actually had to bring his singing down in the audio. Oh. So you didn't get taken out of the moment.
So upsetting.
Well, his voice was changing during the filming of this. So he was turning into Peter Brady.
Time to change. Yeah.
The silver spoons. Or the silver platters, excuse me. But yeah, and even seeing how Russell and it's, yeah, I mean, I don't know, who was it? David Grohl. One time, he went to do a cover of Tiny Dancer. And he was making a joke about certain songs that you don't do covers of. And in the middle of the song, he literally just references and says, this song is now and forever the almost famous song.
Truth.
And it, yeah, I mean, like you said, it's maybe, you know, like there's a lot we could talk about, but it's got to be up there in the, you know, pantheon of all time musical moments in a film.
No, without a doubt. And I think what's so brilliant about it, as you said, it's a mini film. It tells like the whole story of the movie in one scene. Yeah. Which is like really incredible. You don't see that often. And then I also think it's kind of one of the last moments where this world is not infecting William in a negative way. Like, because I think you do start to see a little bit of the turn, which is getting, you know, towards the part of this that, and I'm going to blame Jimmy Fallon, because it does feel like it's Jimmy Fallon's fault.
I forget every single time that Jimmy Fallon is in this movie. It's the first time I've ever seen him in something that he just doesn't burst out laughing.
So he almost ruined the plane sequence because
of course
of that.
He did.
He just couldn't stop laughing. And like the problem with it is like the Russell Hammond character is kind of enjoying it because he's like kind of a psychopath in that way. Like he's kind of enjoying it because he doesn't understand the severity of it, because I think Russell has never had to deal with adversity. He has that sense. Like there's a sense that like Russell doesn't look weathered. He doesn't look aged. He looks like things have been pretty easy for him for the most part. He's had his cake and he ate it too, like kind of guy. And I think that's why he probably approaches that with a lot of lightheartedness. But we get this like, you know, this inclusion of like, now we've changed managers, and there really is like a tonal shift in the film that's kind of pushing us towards the natural conclusion of this. Like there's almost like only so long you can stay in this world without becoming jaded or without like having to see behind the facade of the fun and the love of music.
Well, and that's spoken with, right? It's the shot of them going onto the plane.
Yes.
And William trailing behind and looks back at the bus. It's exactly what you're saying. It's that moment of him looking back and going, it's now all ended. The fun of it is changing. Everything's changed.
Yeah, and I think like there's, you know, because when you get into that plane sequence, when you get in kind of this like next chapter of it, it's like, you know, and I think also like one of the last like kind of final like really, this is a beautiful life and there's so much like vibrance to being the type of person who can exist in this world, is you get that, you have this like beautiful shot of Jeff playing at the Palladium, like just bathed in blue light. And then you get Penny Lane just dancing in the confetti. that is left over from the wreckage. And you realize that's so much like what the end of her story is. This is a person who's going to dance in the wreckage of what this was. But it's also signaling this has to come to an end at some point, because like who William is, like he's, Penny has that great line, "You're too sweet for rock and roll." And he's like, "No, I'm dark and mysterious and pissed off." And you're like, no, like you're not the type of broken that some of these people really are underneath kind of the love of music. There's also these broken pieces that kind of bring them together. And you get into that transition of the next section of the film where things all go to pot in a lot of ways. And you get kind of these really, the tragic side, I think the unfortunate side of like rock and roll lifestyle as you move into like New York City.
The dreaded New York City.
Okay, now. What's that?
No, I think this is where we get the introduction that we've heard about. Russell's girlfriend, ex-wife, gets introduced. And like you said, it's a game changer to the moment. Penny doesn't listen to William or anybody and still shows up, and he finds that out. One of my favorite scenes of this movie, and it's heartbreaking, is when Penny's there, right? And she's not quite sure what to do. She knows she can't go over, but at the same token, her heart's calling her. And I love the moment where everybody tries to protect Russell.
Yes.
Even Jeff, who at this point is just on the other side of evil. Like, I mean, he's even looking at, what's the wife's name? I
always forget because she just makes me mad.
Right, Leslie.
It's not Leslie's fault. I shouldn't say that's not Leslie's fault.
Right? Yeah, I mean, they do make Leslie come across as like the evil character.
Leslie kind of sucks. Like,
but what did she do wrong? Like, she was right about everything.
Nothing. She seems
we don't know the history, right?
No, but it seems like 100% the girlfriend that you're like, wow, aren't you such a killjoy to his creativity? But at the same time, you're like...
So I just love the moment where finally Russell deeply loves Penny.
Yes.
Like, he deeply cares. And so obviously William, there's no question. And just the moment the two of them get up. And it's the stare down of who's going.
Yeah.
Right? And William almost is giving him like, you're the one she wants, you need to go. And he doesn't take it, right? No. And he, for whatever reason, whether he can't, and I love that Crowe chooses to give that moment that Russell breaks. Like he wants to go. And then you have the great shot of Jeff looking over at Leslie and kind of giving the smirk of,
yeah, like that's what you think it is.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's just a really cool scene. Not cool scene. I'm sorry, that's the wrong word there. Emotional scene, and I think it really takes us down the stretch of where we go.
And I also think too, it's the shift finally in the power dynamics between Russell and William, because I think there's been such this idolatry of Russell in so many ways because he has Penny, because he's so talented. And I think you finally see that go away because like the thing at the core of William is he has the highest reverence for women. And I think that's why at that moment he realizes like, this man I can't have the same respect for him that I did. Like, I can't respect him. I can appreciate his music and his talent, but I can't respect him anymore because in this moment he should have gone and he didn't. And I think that it goes back to the relationship that he has with his mother and with his sister. And I think that it's so ingrained in William that he knows he has to go after Penny. It's not even just for love. It's like, she should be taken care of. She's not in a good place. And then, then we get the plazas.
It's a really good point about the respect that he has for women, and Sapphire tells that to the mom. Tells that to Elaine.
Yes.
And Elaine
I love that conversation.
Is listening and it's speaking to her. Like, she's happy about that until obviously Sapphire then has an extra line or two on that, she's like, kind of questions the trustworthiness of that. But I agree with you. I also, though, it does bring us to a point. So this is where we get to the overdose.
Oof, yeah, rough.
Which is tough. I just need to ask this question. Is it a 70s thing, or do all hotels just have a doctor on hand to come up and
I'm going to assume in the 70s it was just necessary.
My man just comes up there with his hose and his sweater on.
It is the plaza. I mean, they have amenities on amenities.
I didn't see that in Home Alone 2. I was confused.
it's in the post-credit sequence.
Right, it's that when he had, too much ice cream.
No, I'm pretty sure, like, Buzz has an overdose, let's be honest. But, like, I think, you get this moment, it's kind of this, like, break in the Penny Lane character. You get the William kind of trying to, like, almost, like, disassociate and play My Sharia more in his head, because this is just, like, such, like, a tragic sequence of, like, kind of, like, the high stakes of, like, this lifestyle they're in. And I love so many of Cameron Crowe's musical choices in this film. I mean, the Tiny Dancer thing is obviously, like, top notch. But to me, Mona Lisa's and Manhatters is it's the end of the party song. Mm-hmm. Go home. It's time to go home. There's something about that song that feels like finality, that melancholic part where you've had a really good night, but it's come to an end and you're kind of driving home. It just works so perfectly here to kind of, like, put a bow on this experience and, like, where Penny Lane has to go to next. And a lot of the kind of real moments we get with her where we understand that, look, she's not damaged, but she's not untroubled by the stuff that's happened. And, her heart got broken in many ways, so now it's, how do I, like, kind of, like, dance in the debris of, like, what this experience was, like, what's kind of my next step. And I love that that's kind of the end cap to their relationship, is that experience together, as hard as it is, because I think it bonds them so much closer together.
I think this is a good time to discuss the music, right? And you and I think
50 songs in this film.
Yeah.
That's the actual number.
No, I know. What's the budget on it was something astronomical.
Oh, it's something I can't remember.
I forget. It's like double what a normal film at that time would ever have. And obviously, once again, Crowe's connections help him with that, because he gets Led Zeppelin, who had only done Fast Times.
Yep.
And I think it was like Small Soldiers.
It's something weird. Yes, yeah. It's like another weird movie.
I can't even remember which one it was. But the music. I mean, this movie's a musical, like, right? Yeah. In many ways, it's the storytelling. You're talking about her dancing. I mean, that's To the Wind, right? Yeah. It speaks to Penny Lane completely, and what you're talking about, this adrift soul that has so much in her, that she's experienced a lot, as we find out after she gets revived, and we got to find out her real name and all of that, but it speaks to the she's had to keep, essentially, what is it? The, fake it till you make it, right? Like, she's had to create this world for her the best way that she can, because she is something special, and that sometimes is given to people, and sometimes those special people don't get to showcase that. But Penny is doing everything she can to create the life that she deserves.
Well, and I think that's important, like, a character who knows that they deserve something grand. Mm-hmm. And something that's not determined by someone else. Like, and I think she knows that. Like, she knows, like, as much as her and Russell love each other, and it comes, like, beautifully back to, like, that moment where they're first together, she knows that they both shine bright, but they're not meant to be together. And I think that's, like, so at the heart of this is, like, you get when Russell finally calls her and he says, let's say all the things we never said. And, like, the sadness of that is, like, he does want to be with her. He does love her, and she does love him. But her life is meant for more than having to play second fiddle to someone else's damages when it comes to relationships. And I think, like, you're exactly right. Like, I think her being that kind of special, that kind of bold and so willing to be herself, like, is that she has to kind of create the space that she can exist in the most brilliantly.
Absolutely.
That's why she's got to go to Morocco.
But I mean, and then that goes back to, again, these musical choices. He throughout the entire film, it just keeps building up to tell these stories and let us understand each character and the mindset and the soul of them and where they're going and where they've been. And most of all, obviously, is Penny Lane. Because, I mean, my question to you would be, who's the main character of this movie?
Penny Lane.
Do you believe so?
Yeah, I find it weird that Billy Crudup gets top billing. Okay, like, so William is.
Or Patrick Fugit doesn't.
I know!
He's like fifth one in or something like that.
So, with those beautifully Cameron Crowe handwritten credits.
Such cool credits.
Where, like, misspells Frances McDormand.
My notes. I have two things I have to say about my notes. One, I wrote, that was the first thing. Coolest opening credits.
Yes.
Again, we use the word a lot. Cool and authentic a lot in this. The other things, he opened with a Christmas song.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So
it's a Christmas movie.
Is it an argument?
It's a Christmas
Alternative
movie.
Christmas?
Alternative Christmas,
I just want to make sure. The other thing was I stopped writing notes a half a page in because I literally felt like, Penny Lane had pulled the pen out of my hand, to William when he's watching, because I realized I can't be writing notes, right? Like, I need to just feel this movie.
It does have that experience. Like, honestly, my notes are dribble. It's a lot of just going, and excuse my language, but fuck, that's cool. Like,
right.
A lot of me writing that in my notes.
We're talking about a lot with the music and the thing. Like, he starts the movie out with a record scratch of a record starting, and then if you listen all the way to the end credits, it's the record scratch coming off, right?
Yeah.
So it's like from beginning to end, that's what it's supposed to be, this contained world that you're in. You're supposed to feel it. You're supposed to live in it. Like,
so is the music the main character?
Oh, interesting.
I'll just say it. And we could talk for hours about this movie, and we're bordering on that, of course. This wonderful ending with...
There's not ever enough time, right?
No.
Like, that's what I said. I know myself, I can't do, justice enough to this movie. Yeah. There's so much to talk about. There's so much to feel. It's just, I wish I could, we could talk for 5 hours, 6 hours, just keep going, because there's so much here. And I know myself, I don't know enough about it. And I wish that I just want to keep learning about this movie.
Well, and I think that's the best films. The ones that I think are so timeless are the ones that you keep discovering something new every time, like different characters or different nuances. And I think that's something with this, because these characters are so layered. I think, you said like Penny Lane takes the pen out of your hand, and I think that's the thing is like she's helping to help us see these stories, help us meet these people that are so unique and so creative, and then and meet her and in all of the ways in which she's both whimsical and deep and really layered and incredibly complex. It's just such a remarkable movie. I've loved it since the day I saw it. I will continue loving it. And I feel like I'll discover something new every time, a song that I didn't really cue into, or a moment, because that's just what Cameron Crowe did with this. He made it something that can feel new and fresh each time you visit it. And I would say this is as damn close to a perfect film as you can have. But with that, as we've been talking about this season so far, is this the type of movie that gets remade? Is it the type of movie that gets a sequel? What do you think?
Well, it's funny you say perfection, because this movie actually was supposed to look a little different. The leads were not the original cast. Russell was originally supposed to be played not by Billy Crudup, but by Brad Pitt, which obviously brings a really interesting, kind of what if with that, because Brad Pitt's one of, our greatest all-time actors.
Well, that's actually the reason why the line about the looks is in it.
Oh, interesting.
Because that was written for Brad Pitt.
Gotcha.
Billy Crudup's very handsome.
Billy Crudup's a good-looking dude.
But it was written for Brad Pitt.
And my understanding is he worked on this for months with Crowe and just never could understand the part. He could never get into the headspace of Russell. So he eventually leaves the project.
Don't you find that surprising? Doesn't it feel like Brad Pitt's kind of fit to play a 70s rocker in some ways? Or
to me, that's Fincher time for him. And obviously he's done Fincher for a lot of years. I could see Brad Pitt, he probably gets more in that headspace now than probably at that time. Because you got to think that was either right after Fight Club or right during. I'm not sure.
It's right after.
Yeah. So that's, an interesting, but Billy Crudup plays this. And I actually think the longevity of this film, Brad Pitt's notoriety, Billy Crudup is a little chameleon, right? He's a big name, but also not super, not Brad Pitt status.
He's not a household name.
Right? And I think that he plays it awesome, and I think if we were watching that today with Brad Pitt, we would be thinking, you'd be looking at Brad Pitt, you
know,
of
course.
As opposed to Russell. And Billy Crudup becomes Russell in that movie. In this movie, excuse me. And then the other major what if, is Sarah Polley was supposed to be Penny Lane. And again, she was on it for quite a long time. Kate Hudson was supposed to play the sister. Sarah Polley evidently, at some point decides to pull out of the project to go work on like a smaller Canadian film. And one of the major reasons is she started to realize how big this part was and felt like she didn't want the notoriety and the lifestyle that would come with this really iconic character, which speaks to, again, the writing of Penny Lane. Why that character speaks so much to you, why that character is, an iconic character throughout, film history, and why we love it. I think it would have been an interesting what if. I think Sarah Polley would have brought a really unique perspective of it. I think you and I have had this conversation before where you say it's a different film with Sarah Polley playing that character. Wholeheartedly agree. It's one of those ones that I would love to have seen it because it really intrigues me. I'm a big fan of Sarah Polley. She kind of got out of acting. She's more in directing now, but her roles in Go and Dawn of the Dead, I think she's amazing in.
Well, and I think that's the thing. I mean, Sarah Polley's an incredible actress. There is something about her, like, because Cameron Crowe was, like, devastated when she pulled out of this. Because he did want her to be in this, like, so much. And actually, like, Kate Hudson auditioned for the part, like, many times. And finally was one of the casting directors like, just give it to her. Yeah. And then, like, and he talks about in interviews, like, how happy he is that it's Kate Hudson. But, like, the Sarah Polley of it all, I think it just makes a very different Penny Lane. I don't think a bad Penny Lane. I don't think... I think it doesn't change the heart of the film. I just think it's a very different interaction with William. I think the relationship between her and Russell is different just because of, like, seeing Sarah Polley and other things. And not that I don't think it's that she couldn't play the enigmatic, like, Penny Lane, but I think there's a way in which Sarah Polley kind of reminds me of, like, a wallflower. And I think it would have been just a very different Penny Lane energy. Like, it would play very differently.
Well, I think you get more of what we believe a Band-Aid groupie, is. I think she plays more into that world where I think Kate Hudson kind of has an almost ethereal type way about her that elevates, that character, and why you understand, essentially everybody falls in love with her, from her friends to all the people in the bands and everything. She has that way. I think there's a real interesting almost grounding that the Sarah Polley, had she had played the role, would have brought to it. That again, like, it's just to me, it's always been one of the biggest Hollywood what ifs. I think that Kate Hudson is absolutely amazing in this role, and it is her role and will always be. It's kind of like Patrick Fugit with William. Like, no matter what they do, these are their characters for, when you leave Hollywood.
Yeah.
That those are the things that are going to be the first things that people talk about. But it's one of the big what ifs that I think would have been interesting to see. If you could see this alternate universe of two different versions of it.
Well, and I don't disagree, because, like, I'll concede this. Like, I think about, like, the scene where, like, Kate Hudson comes into the hotel room and she's doing, like, the flight attendant directionals. I feel like Sarah Polley does that very differently. Like, there's just something about their energies that I think are different. I think ethereal is a good way to put it. Like, if you look at the pictures, so Penny Lane Trumbull was a real life Band-Aid, although it was like a Flying Garter Girls or something. They had, like, a different name for it. She's the prime inspiration for the Penny Lane character. Do you look at pictures of her, she looks a lot like Courtney Love in the mid-90s. Like, that's what the actual Penny Lane looked like. Like, curly blonde hair, kind of like Kate Hudson in the movie.
Yeah.
Looks a lot. Honestly, Courtney Love could have probably played that part at some point.
So this kind of goes back to what you said at the beginning, right?
What?
Cameron Crowe's rose-tinted glasses of the world.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's. But again, yeah, I think Kate Hudson plays this part to be. Every girl wants to be her. That whole thing. Every guy wants to be with her.
Yeah.
So ultimately, in the end, I think the film gods shine brightly on this movie.
Yeah.
And, you know, everything happens for a reason. People, I think, you know, again, it's a damn near perfect film, as you pointed out. And I think it's, you know, the right casting at the end of the day is in this movie.
Well, it's like the Stoltz thing. It's just it's a very different Marty if Stoltz plays it. It's a very... All right, it's not the exact same. It's not an apples to apples, because I think Stoltz played Marty kind of emo, but I think Sarah Polley would have done something really interesting with this part. I mean, maybe just cast Sarah Polley in more things. Maybe she should start acting again. We just want to see her and stuff. You know, this shouldn't be remade. I think the only sequel I would kind of want to see this is maybe something where, like, William's older and his, like, kid wants to go out on tour with, like, someone.
I got your movie for you.
What is it?
I got your sequel.
What is it?
I want to see a movie where William, you know, 20 years later...
Yeah.
Writes a script...
Oh,
and
shush
directs a movie about his time as a writing for Stillwater.
That's your movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
William at that point could be played by Bill Hader.
Sweet Lord, I thought we had escaped it. Go ahead. I get the Ben Schwartz in here. So if you are not currently following,
he's definitely Ben Schwartz. What he's playing the manager.
He's definitely the manager. He's the manager of William trying to make the movie.
Or is he? Yeah, right. Yeah.
So if you're not currently following us on social media, please follow us at How Could You Podcast on Instagram, at How Could You Pod on Twitter. You can always send suggestions to us at howcouldyoupodcast@gmail.com. Stay tuned for our latest announcements of episodes and also our cocktail this week, which is going to be inspired by the classic 70s cocktail, a Harvey Wallbanger.
And until we meet along the long journey to the middle, enjoy the Odyssey.